everybody? Welcome to our first episode of Be the Dream, the new podcast all about realizing your goals and your big time dreams and living out beyond the limits despite what anybody in society tries to put on you. And for our first episode, I've got longtime NFL defensive lineman Colin Cole in the house. Colin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Kevin. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. So you've had a pretty good career, well established in the league, played for multiple teams. Tell us a little bit about your experience in the NFL.
Let's see, 13 years chasing the dream. I started in 2003 as an undrafted free agent with the Minnesota Vikings. I spent a little bit of time on their roster before heading out to Detroit, Michigan to be a part of the Lions. Spent the off season there. Then the following year, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity with the Green Bay Packers, where I spent 5 years of my career. Then into Seattle, and then I had an unfortunate injury that required five surgeries on my left ankle, and that then in turn created a 2 year window of which I was not playing football, and then I was able to land an opportunity with the Carolina Panthers after being out of football completely for 2 years. So it worked out that I was able to finish my career kind of on my own terms, and yeah, I call it 13 years.
You started your career as an undrafted free agent. You know, a lot of people they think, okay, if you played the NFL, you must have been drafted and walked across that stage on draft night and all that hoopla. But there are a lot of players, in fact, probably a bulk of the players in the league, they don't get drafted. And so that's what Be the Dream is about, is fighting through all that. You know, what was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome?
So yeah, I would say that yes, you are absolutely correct that the majority of players that make up an NFL roster, I would say probably about 70%, 65% are undrafted free agents, whether they be rookies, second year, however many years they put into to the job. Most of the players that make up your roster are undrafted. And this NFL thing where the top 1% gets kind of all the public side publication in terms of these big long-term, or not saying, I can't even say long-term, but these big contracts, these multi-million dollar contracts these people are seeing oftentimes are going to 15, 20% of the roster, or 25% of the roster. Whereas the rest of the roster is made up of guys who are um, get paid a league minimum, so to speak. That's exactly what it is. So I will also say this: there are a number of guys who were undrafted that end up being Hall of Famers. So you know the title of being drafted or getting your name called on draft night, one of those 2 or 3 nights, was not defined my career.
So tell me a little bit about what it takes to push through when you're going through that process of trying to make the roster, when you know everybody is just really focused on those draft picks.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting about that is you can only, I live by this and I try to teach everybody who I come in contact with, especially kids that I've gotten an opportunity to coach on my son's team and so on and so forth. You can only control what you can control. You can't control a whole lot else. As it pertains to guys in the locker room, I've been a part of locker rooms for, like I said, almost 13 years. And so I've been able to see a lot of different dynamics. I've seen first round draft picks that were um, not able to live up to the hype that they may have received, or fit the build of what their draft pick stock was. So, and then I've also seen on the other end where you have undrafted guys such as myself who get the opportunity to step up to the plate and take a roster job and do exactly that, especially after being undrafted, which I do want to expand on a little bit because I did mention that I spent some time in some different places. On the other side of that, or that what comes with that, is having to sit in somebody's office and have that conversation as to why they're going to release you. And so um, I had been released 4 times before playing on an active roster for a team. I've been, yeah. So I've been on that.
I don't like to use the word failures, but uh, those times where you had to deal with that disappointment. What was the biggest one that you had to overcome?
The biggest one was my second stop, and I was in Detroit. Which you got to put in perspective. A lot of people are looking at them right now, but us true football fans, we know the Detroit Lions history. We know how bad the Detroit Lions have been for such a long time. And so, 2004, when I was on that roster, and I looked at that roster, and I knew that there were two starters, and Big Daddy Dan Wilkinson and Big Baby Sean Rogers. Those guys were your starters, but I wanted to find my way onto that roster as a backup because as a defensive lineman, most teams in the NFL rotate those guys. So I just wanted to get into the rotation. And so being with Detroit and being on a roster where there were a couple of where I felt like there was opportunity and I felt like I had a decent enough preseason that I should have had an opportunity to be on the active roster. They decided to go with somebody who they felt like had quote unquote more experience than I did. So I was released on the final cut downs. And then they informed me once they released me who actually, you know what? We're at the point now. I've actually never really spoken about who these people were, but Steve Mariucci, he actually sat me down and said I just wasn't good enough. No, actually, he wasn't the one that said that, but he told me that they wanted to release. And but he also informed me that they had an opportunity on their practice squad to join the team. And so I was so ecstatic of being given that opportunity to still stay on the team and you know jump on that side of it. Um, and then yeah, what made that the most difficult of the situations is that that following day, I got a phone call from the offices telling me that they were going to release me again because they needed my roster spot. Definitely had me questioning whether football was meant for me or was meant to be in my future. And so, especially like I said, being that it was Detroit, you know, felt like I had the ability to make that roster, and they unfortunately didn't agree with me. So, it was one of those things that it was devastating, but it was also a springboard. Kind of gave me the hunger to really take advantage of whatever opportunity that I was given, which was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, shortly thereafter.
So you fought through that to really, be that dream. How important is consistency over talent when you're going through those type of processes?
Back in the day, the facilities at the University of Iowa, strength coach Chris Doyle had up in the building, he had a sign that said, talent. That's not what it said. It said, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that holds true across the board. There is always, and has always, and will always be very, very highly talented people. You, I'm sure, know. I know for sure that I know that there are athletes that I grew up with that are probably more athletic than I was that didn't get the opportunities that I got because they didn't either A, have the same kind of dedication, focus, or direction like I have. So, um, how important is that as opposed to having the actual skill? It is so vitally important to be able to maintain a routine and really treat yourself like you are your own franchise or your own brand. And so, being that you're building your brand and you're trying to put your brand in the best possible light that you can, you do your best to be ready, be
Okay.
available. And one of the biggest sayings that I've heard in the world of the NFL is you can't make the club in the tub, which is so true. You cannot stay on the NFL rosters. You cannot stay healthy. I
Wow.
was very blessed physically by God to, except for having the ankle injury, which again caused me to have five surgeries in this 2 years. Um, I was available. I was always available.
Hmm.
I was blessed to have very I had a very good routine in terms of how I handled my business and went about taking care of my body physically. I had a nice budget that I spent on my physical care to make sure that my I was ready to go at all times. And so that was the thing, is being prepared in every aspect, whether it be strength and conditioning, whether it be knowing a playbook, whether it be whatever. There's so many different variables that it could be. But when you are prepared, when you are a prepared person for whatever that challenge is in front of you, you can attack it with so much more vitality.
You seem to be successful also outside of football as well in your post football career. So these skills have to be translatable.
The bigger part of that is learning how to be coachable. Like that's what one of the biggest strengths that I have as a person is willingness to listen, do everything I can to understand, as well as do everything I can to implement what is given to me. So that being said, whether it be at home, understanding what my role is, how that role changed from what the NFL career is when you're 99 or 95% of the time out of the house and working, and not maybe not quite that high of a percentage, but needless to say, your time is so much more directed in on your career at that point. Or if you are take on a new role as a position in the job, you have to be able to make that change.
What does be the dream mean to you?
Mm. When I hear those three words, be the dream, I would say that it just sounds as though it's just a confident person who leads by example, which is something that I've done my entire life, and particularly in my career. I'm not a boisterous person, or I didn't used to be a boisterous person, especially in the locker room, especially as it pertained to like hyping people up or calling people out. That really wasn't me. I led by putting in the work. I led by putting my nose to the ground and putting in the work. And again, I feel like that was a large part of what helped create help for those coaches to really be able to trust that I'd be available and I'd be able to do the job that they needed for me to do. So yes, that's what that is. It's just being an example, being an example of what others strive for.
Awesome. Well, Colin, I want to thank you for dropping in today on our first episode of Be the Dream, and hope you can come back uh, again and be a guest on the show. It's very informative. I think a lot of people out there are in the same position that you were coming out of college playing ball, but also not just athletes, but there are people who are in business right now. There's people, just in college. They might be a science major, but a lot of these things seem to translate in other disciplines in life. So thanks for coming on and thanks for giving your feedback. Awesome.
And the big part about this podcast is I hope we have some great guests that can really speak to what that grind looks like and how they were able to really build themselves through that grind.
For everybody out there, be the dream.